and I scraped up enough money to buy whatever year that Bear whitetail bow that looked like it had about 40 miles of cable on it, and there's a little whitetail 3 one or whatnot, and nobody had a target. And out behind the house, they had a golf deal, and there was a sand trap. And I'd shoot into the sand because it wouldn't tear the arrows up in lieu of a target, and got it sighted in that way and learned about it. And those first deer you shot, you learned about it.
Dan Moultrie, I'm thrilled to death to be sitting here talking to you right now. How are you?
I am great. I am so happy y'all are here. Finally, I get to see the legends. Y'all are it, man. Y'all are it. Y'all have rewritten podcasts. Do you know that?
Man, that's some strong words right there, Jacob.
It is.
How are you?
Speechless. But yeah, Dan, super excited to be here with you. So one thing that kind of blew me away the last couple times we've been to Auburn, okay? School of Forestry building, interviewing a couple of the biologists down there, is learning that all the taxidermy in that building is your taxidermy.
That's correct.
And you've hunted all over the world. You've hunted all over North America and everywhere. And seeing all that taxidermy that you donated to the school, what was the reasoning behind that? I just wanted to kind of get your side of the story.
They approached and said, hey, what do you think about us doing, Mr. Ireland had donated all the pictures. There were oil paintings of all the North American animals. And we thought, wouldn't it be cool to have it for most of those kids coming through there? They've never seen every animal in the flesh of what it is, And we had all those mounts, and we just got together and said, I was on the board of Forestry and Wildlife, and they said, hey, let's do an Auburn Moultrie Museum. And so we did that in there, and most of the stuff is in the Auburn Forestry and Wildlife School building, but a lot of it went to the Solon Dixon Center and some other of the properties around. But there's stuff everywhere, and I get a lot of people say, man, I saw that moose, or I saw the brown bear, or I saw there was a monster western diamondback. It's an 8-foot western diamondback, and I don't know where it ended up, but I get people tell me all the time, I saw that rattlesnake that y'all had mounted in there. But yeah, that was a cool deal. All the people that see it, of all the guys once you get into hunting and you start collecting the heads, and I had buddies of mine telling me, you're going to give your stuff away? I said, no, I'm going to perpetuate it that everybody gets to see it and enjoy it. And I think it's the greatest deal ever to be able to do that. That now everybody gets to see it. And then somebody will ask you about it, and you get to retell the story again of taking them, and that's just, I thought it was the coolest deal we could have done.
Yeah, I think it was good because, like I've talked about it before, I went to that school, and your forestry crowd is a certain type of guys.
Yes.
Right? They're a lot like us. The wildlife crowd, there's some hunters mixed in, but a lot of the wildlife students are not hunters.
That's correct.
And those are your future biologists.
Yes.
And so I think that it actually is pretty important to kind of steep them in that, like just have them surrounded by it, have them understand it, because those people are probably going to be making some kind of policies one day.
They absolutely will be, and that is absolutely true. They need to find out the balance hunting plays in wildlife.
Yeah.
In conservation. And also, I do have to ask, of all that taxidermy, it's a unbelievable amount of taxidermy. Where did you have that stored at?
We had a lodge down in Chilton County, and Mr. Barber had it, that had the place that has the Barber Museum in Birmingham, and we had
Motorsports Museum.
We had gotten the place from him, and we redid the lodge. Used to be the old Woodward Lodge, and it was massive, big, and all that we had collected and put in one lodge. And the stuff y'all saw around here today, I kept just cherry picked some of it, but most of it went to Auburn, except the African animals, and I gave them to another set of friends that wanted the African stuff. But the neatest deal, we get to go and replace it all now. That's what's great. Do it one more time.
That's right. So, Dan, first of all, I want to say thank you for inviting us to your house down here. Sounds like hopefully we'll get to go fishing a little bit later.
We're going to go fishing.
Oh, dude. We're going to go get some stripers. I've been wanting to talk to you for a couple of reasons. One, you're local. You're hometown for us. I remember growing up, and you were talking about that building that Moultrie used to have. I used to live real close to there. I'd drive by it all the time. And I didn't even connect the dots like, oh, that's like Moultrie feeders, Moultrie cameras. And I was telling you earlier, I got the big giant black Moultrie cameras from way back in the day. That's what I grew up using. And where are you originally from? Are you from Birmingham?
I'm originally from Georgia. We were I was sixth generation down our property bordered Callaway Gardens, the Callaway property.
Okay.
And that was the interest down there, and they'd been there, and we hunted Georgia for years and years. And that's originally where we came up with because in those days, the Callaways, Mr. and Miss Callaway would plant mass acreages of property, and they just go bush hog for the deer and all that stuff. That was for Callaway, and I think it was about 47,000 acres was unbroken up to where it's broken in lots of pieces, today. But we had that job of trying to find a way to keep those deer on our place, and that's how we originally, besides just fresh coming out of Auburn in '79, wanting to start a business, I thought, wait a minute, we'll do something in the hunting business. And of course, everybody back in, and I've said this before, hunting was happenstance back then. People were just coming back from World War II, and that whole age group, they worked every day. They didn't if they got to go hunting, it was happenstance. They had a day off and they got to go. It wasn't a lifestyle like it is now. And that was the total difference in it. And we would tell people we're going to hunt business, you're going to starve to death. We did for a few years, like everybody else did in the hunting industry. But that was the time we were fortunate. We were lucky. That was the time hunting was just starting up the hill. And we were able to be part of that from day one out. That was cool as it can be.
Oh, man.
Now, Dan, I want to get into your background.
Yeah.
First off, how were you raised in the outdoors? Like, did y'all hunt as kids growing up? I don't know if you have siblings, but what was your upbringing like in the outdoors?
I was raised, my dad was a hunter from a farm family. My mom was from Colquitt, Georgia, from a farm family. And we were hunting every chance we could. And of course, Dad was from that old school, old deep South. Oh, look here, we're going to bud hunt this weekend. And bird meaning quail. Bird wasn't a dove, bird was a quail. You hear these old men, boys, we're going bud hunting. That's quail hunting. Anybody who hears that now and says, oh, we're going dove hunting, they're going to be looked at by old men. But all that crowd's about to go. But you quail hunted. And that was it. My dad wouldn't have shot a deer. There just wasn't happening. I remember the first turkey I called up for him, though, and he liked that. He thought that was pretty good. But that old crowd wouldn't deer hunt. But there wasn't any deer back then. Nobody would kill any deer. And all that just started. That's when it started. There were some of the big dog hunting clubs during that era, but it wasn't where it was on every piece of property and everybody in the state, had places they deer hunted. Totally different. So I learned from my dad and all our family on my mom's side and dad's side.
What kind of bird dogs did y'all have?
Everybody ran English pointers back then. All these new breeds, I just kind of look and wonder about them. I always thought all you did was run pointers. A lot of people had setters, and then there would be a dog most people don't know of, they call drops. Yeah. It was half pointer, half setter. But when I would go to Texas and we'd carry our dogs, of course, out there, and those guys about broke me of carrying those setters because they'd look at you and go, what you going to do with those shoe shine dogs? You know what they meant by that? They stayed so close, they'd shine your shoes while they walk in the city. And so that made it look, you know what they view that as? And one of the Texas guys told me, he said, look, Moultrie, he said, pointers are like the baddest four-wheel drive trucks. He said, setters are station wagons. And I said, okay, I think I get this.
So you grew up bird hunting first.
That's correct.
What about squirrels, like other small game?
A little bit. On our own, we would go do that, but Dad and his group of guys, it was bird hunting. I mean, that's kind of that old deep South mentality. You bird hunted, and you would shoot doves on a dove shoot once or twice a year at the start of the season, and the rest of the time you're going to bird hunt. But all that other, we enjoyed it and poured into it and loved it. And that's what's common. You look at this group of guys that built the hunting industry, all those groups, look at Toxie and them, look at Cuz, look at any of those people. I guarantee you, everybody you interview, they were eat up with it, just like we were. Man, I didn't get. Hey, when I went to Auburn, I was lucky to make it through just because we were over there hunting every weekend over at Callaway, every second. And then we immediately come out and get into business because you're so enthralled with it, that passion of it, and all that group. Because the deer weren't as popular, there wasn't people mentoring people, there wasn't people showing. Everybody had to learn it on their own. That's why the products got invented. That's where all that came from. Toxie did the camouflage. Will did the calls. Everybody got their little piece of it. That's where the whole industry came from, was that passion to hunt.
Yeah. Now, so you mentioned that deer weren't common back then when you were growing up. Yeah. When did deer kind of come on the scene for you?
It was when we were in college, when I said Auburn. No offense to Alabama, but I said Auburn.
Beautiful school.
And no, Andrews.
No, Auburn's a beautiful school.
And Tuscaloosa got awful good hunting down on that side of the state, but we had pretty good hunting on our side. But I had some friends, and we would go hunting, and I remember almost always, whoever you take, man, I've never even seen a deer. It's the first deer we ever killed. Nobody knew about them. And especially if they killed one, they didn't know how to process it. They didn't know what, there wasn't anybody. There was nobody processing deer. Back then, I don't guess there was a deer processor anyway. You better know how to cut it up because they wasn't getting cut up if you didn't. And so all that grew from that. But all that was about that 75, 76 range. Prior to that, it was all bird hunting.
So you started deer hunting in college. You remember,
Yes.
like, what was your first deer hunt like? Do you remember it?
Cold, long, it seemed like, not knowing what to do, getting mentored by a few guys that said, hey, do this or do that. But really, nobody was. I remember the first one we killed over in Georgia. There was guys coming. There was an old country store we would hang around, had old potbelly stoves, and everybody'd go warm up by it. And we had the deer out there in the truck, and all them old men, they'd come in and they'd look at you, and you had camo. You boys bud hunting? No, sir, we deer hunting. There's one in the truck. Let's go look at it. I don't think any of them had ever seen a deer up close like that. They just wasn't deer. That was the start of that. The very start of that was in that 70s time frame.
So did you get bit by it pretty quick where you're like, oh, I want a deer hunt?
Bit, I was off the chart. I mean, it ate me whole. It was over. It was over. I thought, oh my gosh, this is good stuff. It was unbelievable.
Do you remember back in college when you saw your first decent rack buck? Yeah. When y'all said you shot your those first deer, were you shooting does? Was it spikes? Was it rack deer back then?
Any buck that was legal back then got shot. And you know what? You may have had the difference in was it was kind of cool. You were deer hunting. Mm-hmm. You weren't trophy hunting. And I'm off the chart to trophy hunt too, so I like it either direction. But it was kind of fun that you were deer hunting. There's a picture of Toxie and I. Toxie and I both had, I guess we were married. We may not have been married, and this is early days, but we're standing in front of a barn, and there's a bunch of spikes and 4-points and stuff hung up behind us. And and it's an old picture, and Toxie's standing there with his wife, and I'm standing there with Patty, and people will say, y'all kill those? Man, that was it. That was book then. If you kill that, that made book. It was unbelievable. That was cool as it got.
How did y'all? I do want to know how things really changed in the last maybe 4 decades. But back then, how did y'all hunt? Were y'all still hunting? Did y'all do, I'm not going to say dries, like how did y'all deer hunt back then?
Almost all still hunting. Mm-hmm. And nobody had money for a tractor. Nobody had money to make green fields. Nobody was feeding back in. It was you went and picked a spot, and you found a spot where they frequented it, and that's the way you kill them. And that earliest time of learning about the rut to all of a sudden you hunt all year and you never see a buck, and all of a sudden in 10 days you see more bucks than you've seen the entire year. And hey, something's different about this. And learning that whole deal, that whole curve. and being and I still tell people this day, I go, they'll talk about wanting to kill a good buck, and I'll go, when's your rut? Well, we're not really sure. And I'll tell them, I said, go to the sporting goods store, the local sporting goods store, look on the wall. All those bucks on that will be within about 7 days killed. That's when you ought to be hunting. You want to kill that buck. And now people understand that, though. All the cat's out of the bag on that.
Then, for your passion for whitetails, again, just the opportunity early on, what was so different about whitetails that got you excited versus like the bird hunting, small game hunting? Was it the size of the animal? Was it the style of hunting? What about it really caught your attention?
Just everything, I guess everything. Back, when I was growing up, Daniel Boone's show and Davy Crockett shows on TV, everybody watched it. That was cool to be that outdoorsman. But nobody saying, again, I don't know if I remember anybody had a deer on the wall. Maybe some old guys had one here that was killed on a dog drive at one of these big clubs, But it wasn't like it is now, totally different. And it was cool to come along and learn that, and I transitioned into the bears awful hard. The bears ate me alive, just absolutely loving to hunt them and all the different bears. But the deer were cool, and all of it got based off that deer hunting, learning to hunt. And the same deal. You learn to hunt these southeastern deer. You learn to hunt these deer in Alabama and Georgia and Mississippi. You can kill any deer anywhere there is. These are the toughest deer there are. Period. They are. Y'all hunted all of y'all know. Mm-hmm. They're tough. You kill them here, you can kill them anywhere. Especially bow kill them here.
Now, I was going to ask you, when did you transition to start bow hunting? Were you bow hunting back then?
I was bow hunting. I remember I was still living with my parents, and I scraped up enough money to buy whatever year that bear whitetail bow that looked like it had about 40 miles of cable on it, and there's a little whitetail 3 one or whatnot, and nobody had a target. And out behind the house, they had a golf deal, and there was a sand trap, and I'd shoot into the sand because it wouldn't tear the airs up in lieu of a target, and got it sighted in that way and learned about it. And those first deer you shot, you learned about it, and you had to know more about. I see a lot of guys go and they'll wound deer and lose them, or we'll be guiding them out in Texas or somewhere and say, okay, shoot, you're back, you hit him in the liver or whatnot. And they're like, how do you know? And it's the way they act. But a lot of that is because they don't know how that deer is made up or how the angle of the shot ought to be and whatnot. And you had to learn all that back in. Now people think, oh, if I hit him, I'm going to kill him. No, that's not how it is. So there's a little more training to all that. But all that was in that learning curve. Everybody was just coming up. I think that probably the compound bow of everything in the deal probably is one of the biggest changes in the hunting industry. In my tenure of almost 50 years, I think the compound bow is one of the absolute game changers in the hunting industry. There's been lots of stuff come down the pipe, but you think what changed it more than that compound bow?
Yeah.
That's big time.
Did back then, did you have like a bow hunting mentor? Did you know any older guys who were just dyed-in-the-wool bow hunters who taught you stuff?
I didn't know anybody. There was a guy when I was at Auburn, an old man that worked down at the Uniroyal plant that hunted when we would hunt down there and ran into, and he had an old, may have been a Jennings or something. He had some older bow, and slow as Christmas. You could whistle and wait while the air would get there, But he had hunted a little bit, and he was talking about it, and we would learn things from them and go. The guy that invented the Simmons broadhead down there was a good friend, Jerry Simmons, and you'd learn from guys like that. George Mann had done a bunch of bow hunting. He and I hunted together and hunted all over. We went all the way up to Newfoundland, caribou hunting, and everywhere, and all bow hunting. And those guys, you would learn stuff from if you'd listen to those guys. And most guys, because there wasn't videos or anything. The very first video I remember coming out was bow hunting October whitetails with Barry and Gene Wensel. And you look how many there is now, and I couldn't name you, hardly any of them that are out now, but you remember that one. That took it by storm in our industry. People able to see what they were doing, Oh, it was bad.
So when you mentioned like you went to Auburn, that's where you started deer hunting. What'd you go to Auburn for?
I originally was in architecture, believe it or not, and after sitting in Biggin Hall for about 2 years and made great grades. But I was sitting up at 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning, every single morning, over there drawing or building projects. And I thought, this could be tough after we get out. And I asked one of the professors, I said, what changes when you graduate? I said, about the same thing. He said, you'll do a little more business, but you're still going to be on the project end. And I transferred into business, and all my credits transferred, and business just came easy. I thought it was the easiest thing I'd ever been in. Transferred into business, smoked it, had time to hunt and make great grades in business, and all the business just came, and it was a better fit. And then all that kind of went together, you know, that old saying, God takes care of fools and children. And he took care, he got me into business there for a reason, to be able to start these businesses and do what we've done in the industry.
So when you were in that business school, were you already formulating like you wanted to do something in the hunting industry?
I knew I wanted to do something, but I didn't know it was in the hunting industry.
Well, I say hunting industry.
Until I graduated and it hit me, and I had a guy early on tell me this, and I've told a zillion young folks coming to open their businesses, and this is a great acid test. You tell people, tell me anybody who's successful doing something they don't enjoy. Not any. You got to enjoy it. And this guy told me, he said, you better get this, eat up and hunting as you are. You better go in the hunting business. And of course, my dad was Southern Company. He'd been with them as soon as he got back from World War II. He got in Southern Company. When he retired, he had 46 years with them. And I had started working with Southern Company. And the day I had to go tell him just a few years after that, hey, I think I'm going to go into the hunting business. Of course, he's thinking, yeah, y'all are going down there drinking beer and deer hunting big time. And you're going to go broke, son, kind of deal. That was a special day to remember that. But we were so, again, we met the acid test, passionate, wanting to learn, wanting to grow it. And it just worked. But all the guys that y'all interview in our industry, that old school, the Harold Knights, the Toxies, the Prestons, all of them, they're passionate about it. That's what started it. Mm-hmm. It ate them up. Same deal with us.
I'm glad you brought that up. Like, it's very hard, if not impossible, to find someone who's successful at some career path that they're not passionate about. Mm-hmm. But when you got started, and we're going to kind of get into the genesis story of Moultrie as a company, there wasn't much of a hunting space company-wise in industry, as people would call it today. So it was very much paving a way for all these other companies now around. What even gave you, maybe not even the confidence, but what did that first conversations look like when you had this decision that you're going to try to figure out something to do in the hunting space?
You know what? There was nobody to really discuss it with. I just decided I was looking for something, and we'd learned enough at Auburn Business School, find a path that there was a end to that you could grow, you know, and I just kept thinking there's got to be something in the hunting industry. And my brother, this story's been told a zillion times, had an electronic company in Atlanta, very successful with it, and understood electronics. He and I were totally opposite on. I was a mechanical guy, he was an electrical guy. He was a fishing guy, I was a hunting guy. But when we needed to build the first feeders or whatnot, I was able to call on him and get help to design the circuit board. First one we built, I drew it out on a napkin at Christmas. And I said, I want to go in this business. And I drew it out, and he wrote a list of parts. And he said, buy multiples of 10 of these, and we'll build 10. Sold those first 10, built 20, built 30, built 100, built 500. Started going it up, and it was just, you know, never failed. One of the neatest deals, we've never, even to today, in Moultrie holding the #1 name in feeders, never have we had a year that hadn't been greater than the first year that we founded it almost 50 years ago. And that cool? I mean,
going up every year.
That's growing it. It's unbelievable.
Man.
So the first product, of course, being feeders. At the time, talk to me about who was your customer base, and game laws back then? Like, were there states that were allowing baying, or was it not even written back in game laws? Like, how did that work early on?
Texas was about, there was one of the few, for many years early on, Texas was 50% of our business model. Because that's how big Texas was. And in Texas still today, I think, number 2 or 3 license holder in the nation. Tons of hunters, and if you hunted Texas, you fed. Mm-hmm. And so when we started marketing, there wasn't any going in a dealer or any of the mass. We had to go to the individuals, lots of advertising ads, lots of mock-ups to show, a feeder holding game. And it wasn't really marketing to, hey, this deer is going to be standing there for you. It was more holding game, and we never crossed that line. We've always tried to, we're as serious about the consumptive side as we are the non-consumptive side. A lot of folks don't want to kill them. A lot of folks just like to see them. We're going to cater to that group too. That's an important deal. They need to remember that. These people, they don't like that, I don't like that. That's not right. Everybody's got their own gig, So we were able to market to both those sides and grow it, and were active with a lot of the states as the laws started changing and the feeding laws became more popular with stewardship. You got to look, that was the time it went from nobody doing anything. Again, that time I was telling you, the guy had a day off, he went out to go hunting. It wasn't a lifestyle. Then a guy bought a place and he wanted to build green fields. He wanted a better way to hold them. We did a program with Purina, probably the number 1 name in the world of high protein, nutritious feeds. We had a co-op deal with them where we were marketing with them, and I thought, as a young company, here we are, Purina. And I remember one of the ads, it showed a feeder, and we were talking about using the Purina protein feed, and it said, Mother Nature can be one mean lady, meaning it was hard on the game without that happening. And it was a cool deal, and I thought, that'll go somewhere. And kept on and got that there. Cuz was instrumental in helping us with a lot of our advertising. He had done some advertising stuff and advising. One of the neatest deals, I'm going to tell a Cuz story. I love Cuz stories.
We love Cuz stories too.
But we were doing a deal. I told him, I said, I got an idea. The Georgia lottery, the Texas lottery, and there was everywhere the Texas lottery, and they'd have these big signs on every building, every C-store you went into had them, and it talked about the Texas lottery. And I said, listen to this, Cuz. I said, the phrase, we've killed more big bucks, or there have been more big bucks taken with Moultrie than Texas lottery. And he said, I like that. And so we started working with it. We went to Texas lottery, had it approved. I still got one. I think I've got one of those posters in that other room there where I hadn't unpacked it yet. And we made these big posters, and it showed a picture of a Moultrie feeder and bucks up under it. And those same words, more bucks had been taken with Moultrie than Texas lottery. We got it approved through them. There's no telling how many of those posters we ran and put up through the state of Texas. We get a call. Texas Lottery calls me. Head guy, I guess, Mr. Moultrie. We need to talk. And I was like, what? I said, everything okay? He said, yeah. He said, everything's real good. He said, except, he said, we need to kill the program. I said, why are we going to kill the program? He said, everybody thinks now at the lottery that they're going to get a feeder, that the feeders are attached. They were seeing that feeder and they thought they'd get it. Of course, everybody in Texas hunted. They thought they got a feeder if they bought a lottery ticket. And so we had to kill the program. But I viewed that as if it hit that good, that was the most successful program we could have possibly have done. Showed a pair of Texas cowboy boots with it was bad. But Ronnie helped us through that.
Talk to me, because now in the digital age, and I don't want this necessarily to be a whole business podcast, but I am curious. Now it's the digital age. It's, to me, marketing, you have so many options for marketing. Back then, what was your main ways of marketing yourself, especially as an early company, and getting the name out there as you were trying to grow your business?
I never got away from it. I think it's the reason Moultrie's where it is now, besides being fortunate for how the flow of the business went. But one of the deals we did from day one, period, I'd tell every employee, take ownership in the company like you owned it, but I'd tell them 3 things we got to do: sell the brand, sell the brand, sell the brand. If there was somebody that was going to be the Kleenex tissue or the Xerox copying machine, that was where we were going to be at in the feeders. And that's what we did, and that's what we harnessed that. And that's where we were able to take that little bitty name brand to make it a great brand. And that T in the brand up, that was a huge deal. Then when people got interested, to circle and answer your question, then when they wanted a feeder, oh, what's the name of it? Moultrie. Yeah, that's the one to buy. You had the brand. The brand was the key.
That's a excellent point. And also, I'm sure with that, a little bit of customer service, because especially early on, and I'm curious of this from a business, you being, again, not just owning one business, but multiple businesses. Yeah. How much was customer service a factor for you early on when this is something that nobody's ever seen before, never used anything like it? Was it pretty easy for customers to kind of figure it out? Or is there a lot of long phone calls talking to customers late at night?
They kind of figured it out easy, but the deal we did, and I discussed it on that other tape that we sent you, that show we did. There was no. I put in a policy. I saw people having trouble with them. They'd break them. The feeder would tear up. You look at a car. You put it outdoor. You put any kind of piece of equipment outside, it's going to tear up at some time. Man, a hunter's got hundreds of dollars involved. He's chapped. He goes down and drives 4 hours to his hunting place, and it didn't work. He's chapped. He's wanting to eat up somebody when he talks to him. So we went in and we guarantee there's no, it may say 1 year or 2 year. You got a problem, we'll give you a brand new one. And I had this old guy, business guy, one of these old cigar smoking guys that said, look, Moultrie, said, you done pretty good, but you're going to go broke. I said, how you get that? He said, you can't give away all that. He said, you're going to go broke doing that. And I didn't want to be curt to him, but I said, no, let me tell you something. If we don't do it, we're going to go broke. And that's exactly what we built that off of. And I still have people to this day. One of the guys that came to work for us that used to work at a competitor, he goes, man, you were killing us doing that. He said, we couldn't do it. And that made, again, you got to make sure that people know if you're selling a product and you stand behind it, they're going to keep on buying it. And think about this. Let's say that the feeder fell and smashed it, or their wife ran over it. And they call us and go, hey, your deal, this crap tore up. It's no good. And we said, no, we'll send you a brand new one. Think about this. Everybody thought, oh, man, you're just losing money. No. You think that guy didn't go to 20 of his best friends and go, holy smokes, we tore it up and they gave us a brand new one. Why would they buy anybody else's? They were thinking the wrong way about the way that should have worked.
You're building brand loyalty by doing that.
Sell the brand, sell the brand, sell the brand.
So it might be the off season, but we're still always thinking about whitetails. And if you're looking to get more mobile this fall and you're looking at saddle setups, the 2 most common designs you're going to see are a single panel design or a double panel design. They both have their advantages and disadvantages. A single panel design is going to be more comfortable right out of the box, while a double panel design is going to be much more adjustable and customizable to your fit. We always say on the podcast, saddles are kind of like boots. Different people are going to like different things. As a general rule of thumb, I found that heavier set guys typically like a single panel more than they like a double panel. But other than that, it's just really a matter of preference. I personally use both of these saddles. This is the Method 2 from Latitude, and this is the Lone Star from Latitude. I will say that the Method 2 is really nice because it's a 2-panel design. It's almost like you have a built-in back band that'll take a little bit of pressure off your back when you're sitting down. But if you're just getting into saddle hunting and you want something that's extremely comfortable right out of the box, the Lone Star is going to be your go-to. It has an advanced hip pinch reduction system in it, so right out of the box, this is going to be very comfortable, and you're not going to have the hip pinch issues that a lot of people have when they first get into saddle hunting. So if you want to be more mobile this fall, check out latitudeoutdoors.com to see these 2 saddles and a bunch of other mobile hunting gear. We've enjoyed them a lot, and I think you're going to enjoy them too. All right, guys, we're out here today. Got a little in the field tip for you. We're scouting this fresh clear cut. I think this was cut sometime in the spring. We identified this using onX's recent imagery layer. This image is about 2 weeks old. They update this every 2 weeks, so you're getting brand new satellite images. So we were able to find this beautiful clear cut. I mean, look at this. This looks like where a lot of big bucks get killed in the south in rifle season. So we're actually using this tool along with the topo map to walk and look at this low spot over here to see if we can find a good rifle setup for when the rut comes in a couple weeks. So we're gonna walk over there and check that out. In the meantime, if you want to access this or any of the other features available with the onX Elite membership, use the promo code SOUTHERN and you can get 20% off.
I want to ask about early on, like you're mentioning, a lot of the hunting was more happenstance
Yes.
back then. So, I mean, what were some of those early challenges trying to break in where you're like, hey guys, I don't even know how much your feeders cost back then when you first started making them, but how do you convince people who aren't, it's not like it is today. So how did you convince people to start spending more money on it?
We, back then, and I don't know, do y'all remember the name Ben Rogers Lee?
Yes.
Oh yeah.
Icon in the turkey early. I mean, he used to, those guys would come sit in that audience. Ben would start speaking, and those guys were sitting on the edge of their chair, their eyes this big around, listening to those stories. Of course, Ben made every one of them up. And he would tell them, he said, look, I've killed more beer bottles than I have rifles going down the road. And he would have them just howling. I mean, they were such loyal fans. It was unbelievable. And in those earliest shows, when Ben and I were together, I'd introduce Ben, Bob Dixon would introduce me, and Bob and Ben would have just an unbelievable time. But we would both, I'd talk about Ben's calls. Ben would talk about the feeders. Bob would talk about the feeders, and we'd talk about the camouflage. And the whole deal worked, and you had the trust of those people. So then they would think, man, I need to try that. And of course, here's the deal. If they tried it with ours, and of course, any camouflage the same way, if you use it, you're going to be more hidden, especially turkey hunting. And for what Mossy Oak did and what we did, wait a minute, you put out corn, you think animals aren't going to come around it? Every kind of animal there is in the woods, game and non-game. So once you got them to try it, and then during those trade shows, we'd show videos from those earliest rough videos, but it showed the feeder going off and the deer coming. People, I'm going to try that. That first time they had a little bit of success, they're going to tell that same 20 other guys. That's what started it rolling.
Right. Now, also, back then, you've kind of mentioned, again, like it wasn't a lifestyle like it is right now. And then you also mentioned a lot of those guys used to be bird hunters. Mm-hmm. I'm just curious on your thoughts on the progression of what people call the hunting industry today and what it was back then. Why is it like how it is right now, in your opinion? Is it just because turkey populations exploded, deer populations exploded, and now there was animals to hunt, or is it something else? I'm just curious.
Well, Game and Fish throughout the U.S. did an unbelievable job getting populations stabilized, getting in the regs and rules that needed to be done. Don't mistake, that's where the game populations came from. And then techniques in hunting, and in more leisure time. There'd never been that leisure time till the boomer my generation, the baby boomers. Nobody had that. Everybody worked. There wasn't any time for that. I mean, just every now and then, and probably more fishing than there was hunting then. And unless you grew up in a farming kind of background, and then again, still you were in the South, you were bird hunting. And that, coupled with the growth of the game and that people passionately took to it, and just, as y'all know, if you go, you kind of get gut hooked into it pretty quick. You either really like it once, you don't like it at all. There's no in between.
Yeah.
When did you add new product lines outside of just the feeders? Like, how long were you doing feeders before you started expanding to different options?
We started originally with a 5-gallon bucket. 5-gallon bucket. I thought at first we got to have the kit attached, to the bucket. So we sold it with a bucket. Then we did a 30-gallon with it, and did the first kit we did was unbelievably popular, and we started selling SAMs then. And that year, if I remember correctly, and I'm pretty sure it was close, it was all, we offered the kits in Sam's. And I think it was the number 17 selling item that year. That's how many, I mean, I remember that was when the old fax machines printed. Kevin Turner was president of Sam's, and who's a huge hunter too now. But those fax machines would roll the paper on a continuous roll. Those POs would come off there and just be rolls on the floor, and I'm like, this is great. This is great. You'd have a secretary cutting them up, cutting them, because everything was one continuous roll. And how far business has been, and you get antiquated. Guys my age, and most of us, when I worked at Southern Company, the same way, guys had secretaries. And so any of the typing a letter was done by a secretary. And then it went to computers and email. Everybody wrote their own thing. All my age group was like, oh no, this is bad for us, because we never learned all this. And Mike Callahan, that used to be at Cabela's, one of Cabela's key guys that grew to Cabela's to what it was, told me one day, he goes, Moultrie, you and I are the biggest technophobes that there's ever been in this industry. But it was just a different generation then. But everybody kind of found their way with it, But yeah, it was different.
Now, as you expanded and I remember, I know you still sell the kits, but all the feeders my uncle would have on his place, they're all 55-gallon drum feeders with one of your kits on it. And, going out there and modifying them and, putting it all set up. At what point did you expand outside of just the feed side of everything? Feeders and modifications for feeders and stuff like that. What was that product line that you kind of moved out away from the feeders?
We played with a lot of different, we quite tried the quail market. We tried as far as quail feeders and that kind of stuff. Mm-hmm. We had dog feeders for kennels. We did Walmart contracted with us, and we did a item we call the pet deli. That was an inside the house feeder. Sounds fantastic. And this is Walmart behind us saying, hey, we're going to stock it in however many thousand stores, and we think it'll be a big deal. You know what we learned by that? It's probably and nothing, I think we've been fortunate, nothing was an absolute failure, but it was something that was a lot slower than everybody anticipated. You know what that was, what the reason was? And this is, I guess we should have known that beforehand. People, their hobby in the evening when they get off work is feeding their dog. They didn't want to give that up for something doing it automatically. That probably should have done our homework a little bit better. I don't know, everybody watches that Clarence on Facebook, the Black Lab deal, that all the stories. That's kind of how everybody, that's part of their lifestyle with their dog. So you'd go try that stuff, even though it failed, you'd click it off and know, okay, let's move to this one. And we started trying all the different stuff, got into the commodity side. We were, at one time, I think we had every major mass merchant in the United States with corn. You go in Walmart, there were big Moultrie bags. You go in, I think there's some in the back of that cabinet over these big Moultrie bags, you talking about millions and millions and millions and millions of sacks of corn, and having to coordinate the business model on that, and watching that commodity move and knowing when to lock down and buy old crop, new crop, whatever to make that work. That was quite the job. But that added to the deal. Plus, the views on that sack, I always viewed it, if we had to give it away to break even, look at the impressions we were hitting off the views on those sacks. Moultrie, Moultrie, Moultrie. Go back again. Sell the brand, sell the brand, sell the brand.
God, I wanted to ask about the trail cameras too. Yeah. We were downstairs earlier talking, and we were kind of talking about the genesis of how you guys started your trail cameras. And you had a great story about bear hunting and how you guys would track the color phase bears. Can you tell that?
Yeah,
that was fantastic.
And that is the absolute truth about it. We were carrying customers up to Canada bear hunting. A lot of the guys wanted color phase bears. And we tried everything. We welded big tuna hooks like you just got off of to the drum. And if it would scrape a little bit of hair, you'd go and you'd see that red hair, and you'd say, hey, there's a cinnamon bear here. There's a red black bear here. There's one that's got a big white chevron on him. There's white hair on it. you know, and you could find out, but there was no way to know. Nobody had cameras. And there was, and this is long time ago in the industry. This is at the very first start. That's when we were carrying some of the feeder customers up there, and we'd stay up there and hunt. And 3M made a little timer, and this is really where I got the idea from. And it had a string that would go to it and a piece of plastic, and it was like a watch front clock. And when you pull that out, it broke the battery contact. And when you stuck it back in, just like your microwave does now, when the power comes back on, it shows the time. Mm-hmm. It showed the time. So you could tell when a bear hit the bait, you could say, hey, that bear hit the bait at 1:12 in the morning. He's a nocturnal bear. We're not going. And it would get you in the game somewhere, giving you information. And I kept thinking, how can we figure this out about the bear? And I bought a Victor rat trap, those that are about that big, not the mouse trap, the rat trap, broke the spring down to where it would just sort of push, not slam like it does. And I went and I found a camera, and the earliest ones had self-advance. And y'all may not even be old enough to remember, when you go in the stores, at every counter was film canisters, 12, 24, 36 rolls of film. I remember the guy that was buying impulse items at Walmart, Clifford Young, buddy of mine that was up there, the buyer impulse, and no telling how many $1 billion worth of merchandise he would buy. His top 3 items was film. And that was, everybody had film camera. And that in today's world, everybody's like film. But so you had that camera and you had to manually click it to get the shutter to go off. So we made it, I Rube Goldberg'd it, put the same kind of string as that 3M timer had on it, but our own deal to that rat trap. The treadle on that mouse trap would hit exactly on the camera shutter. You get one picture. And the first time, and I've told you downstairs, all this now of, you get 1,000 pictures a day, it's AI sorts them and tell it, and that's cool. As good as it gets. That first time I walked in on that bear bait and that treadle was tripped and I had one picture. Oh my God, it was unbelievable. You'd go to the store, there was a little store up in that little place in Canada, and you'd have to pay the 1 hour. And I'm thinking, God, the 1 hour. And one thing I did, and I've told this a couple of times, it's great. Never would I use my name, because I was thinking they'd know where we were hunting and they'd see that picture of that bear on that bait. They'd know. So we always would put a fictitious name because so they wouldn't know where it was. And we would get the pictures back and you'd have one picture. You'd pay for that whole roll. So then it became, well, can we wait a day? Do you pay the 1 hour processing or do you pay the deal? And we had it for years. We carried a ton of guys, and I've told you downstairs, the change was my buddy of mine in Texas that was a mogul in the hunting industry. Everybody knew him. He was it. It was Ray Mursky, and knew more about selling stuff than anybody. And he said, you've got to develop this with the feeder. He was our rep then too, his rep organization. And so we got it ready to go to market, carried it to a couple people. You talking about getting no. Not no, you're talking about getting hell no. We're not going to carry that. People thinking, I remember the buyers telling me, you think some guy's wife's going to let him spend $300 on a camera and put it out in the woods? You know, that before that, nobody ever put a camera in the woods. And Ray went to the sporting goods board and he stood up for us and he said, guys, if you'll stop, he said, listen to what I'm telling you. This will be one of the biggest items ever in the hunting industry. How he knew that, I don't know, but his forethought, he hit it dead on the head. Dead on the head. Because here's the reason. Everybody has suits of camo, everybody has tree stands, everybody. But if you got cameras, you got bunches of them. And about everybody who hunts now has gone into that camera deal. And so we're very fortunate it went that way. But that's what started that deal off, was that deal with the bears. Was trying to do that. But I'm talking about, we held it for probably 7, 8, 9 years before we ever let anybody know. The guys, I'd never share it with the guys. It was one of those secrets, when you were guiding. You could put them on a bear. How'd you know that bear was in Oh, we scouted him. We did with that camera. How about that? That is absolutely gospel truth.
So what year was that? When you made the
it
first
was-
one with the rat trap and the tripwire?
Way back, way back. I mean, early 80s. Early 80s. Way, way back.
Man, it's so funny hearing that too, because like hunters are going to be hunters, and you had like this product that would end up being this big thing, but you're like, I don't want to share this.
I remember I was telling people, and people would just say, no, no, and you know what? But it was that specific deal. Little did I, and bear hunting on the pie chart is a little bitty sliver. Whitetail hunting is that great big sliver. That's what I was missing that Ray Marsky kept saying, Mosley, you got to get to this sliver with it.
And then, so how long? So those first cameras, you got one picture out of them.
One picture.
One picture.
One picture.
How long did it take you to develop something where you could get multiple pictures out of it?
You then became, in the early days of cameras, instead of a manual wind, they had a little motor in it. And if you remember I don't know, y'all are too young to remember, but when it went, it sounded like a bad wheelbarrow on a car. You'd hear it grrrr. That's that motor grinding that. Of course, any animals in the area are going to be gone. Of course, they'd come back. But so we went to that. Then but once we decided to go to market with it, we researched it like we should have done. We got the best camera that was available and that would do all that. But you still had to go in and take because we went from a manual string being pulled, lever hitting the camera to set it off. We'd had to take the manual button apart. I remember our techs in the back soldering wires to all that button is a wire here and a wire here, and when you push it, it makes the connection. So we wired back, and then heat and motion, infrared and motion is what set them off. So then you had that triggering the camera. The hardest transition in the whole deal, and we were fortunate, I think we were the very first in digital, I know we were the first in cellular, but the transition from auto wind to digital, and most people didn't know, we were working on that. Here was the problem, and most people never saw this. We would buy these digital cameras, but for a digital camera to work, it had to stay on 24/7. You used to turn a camera on. When you would buy a digital camera, you'd hear it go, bzzz, and it's warming up. And then it would come and it'd warm up and it'd take about a minute, and then finally it'd give you ready to make a picture. The camera had to sync itself and go. You couldn't do that on game, it'd be gone. So we had to power it. We had those very first ones, I remember we would lug car batteries out there, and they'd drain those car batteries because it's running all the time. So how did we bridge that gap with getting and finally we figured out how to do that, and had enough, thank goodness for smart engineers, good Auburn engineers, that figure out how to, I had a Georgia Tech one on, so that we could get that figured out, that it wouldn't drain the battery life. But like those big ones you said about all the different batteries that was in them, that was why. They would eat batteries. Even in today's market, you got one that uses AA's instead of the lithium batteries. Man, during cold weather, it's sucking it out. That's the reason all the car batteries go dead when it's cold. It drains the battery. It's tough. And then that change to digital was tough. We got that figured out. That was a huge, huge change. Because then we could give you, that's when that 3-shot burst came about in the camera industry, or 5-shot burst. Bah. It could hit them and you'd have them. Because you had the camera up, running, and all electronic would flip the shutter.
Yeah, I was telling you earlier that I've tried to find it before we came here, but I've got one of those big cameras that takes a whole bunch of D batteries, and it has the white flash on it. Mm-hmm. It's like a big flash. And man, I just remember being a kid with my dad, going out to the woods to check that thing, and you couldn't quite find it. It's starting to get dark, and that thing would, blind you.
And that didn't go when we were those earliest pictures, and you would see the game spooking, and that's when all that black flash was developed. And of course, everybody, that was the term that originally came out, no glow, black flash, all the different acronyms for that. All that was a piece of plastic put over the front of it to tame it down. Because you don't need a ton of light, but all of them were like filter cloth over the front. That was the very first. Then you would get that down where it would not spook them, and it'd be infrared. And, I guess everybody was watching too much TV about spy stuff, and they'd talk about infrared camera. We finally got to that in the hunting industry, and all the people that were in the camera industry, that flooded through the camera industry, no glow and the infrared, so that you couldn't see the flash. It absolutely makes a difference. Now, will the animal get used to it in some cases? Yeah. These Alabama deer and Georgia deer down here, maybe not.
Yeah. I've still got old trail camera pictures of me, a little kid, and my dad checking those cameras, man. And I remember taking that. I had them for years because I couldn't go buy another camera because I was like 16 and I didn't have any money. So I just kept using those even past the point where cameras had advanced way past that, and I'm like lugging these things out in the woods, and I mean seriously, they're ginormous. But yeah, that's a good memory of mine, And another thing I wanted to ask you about is how did you end up in Birmingham, by the way?
I was originally in Atlanta. As soon as I graduated Auburn, I started working for Southern Company, like we talked about. Southern Company was in Atlanta and Birmingham. I went to Southern Company in Atlanta in auditing, and had already started the business and was doing it at night and trying to get things rolling, and get things going. And the first time an opening came up that I could come back to Birmingham, because I knew I was trying to get this bit, and I was just like y'all starting your bit. At some point, you want to be able to do that full time, and I could move back to Birmingham. So I moved back to Birmingham, came back to Birmingham, and then the week that Patty and I got engaged, I remember going out to her house, and her dad was sitting there with the newspaper. And she said, look, Dan gave me a ring, we're getting married. And she said, and he's leaving his job at the power company this week. And I remember that paper went right back up, and I thought, this isn't going to be good. That is the awful true story, too. But that was that time that it was, and you had to just like y'all have, you go and give it all you got and skimp and save and do what you got to do, but you make it successful, whatever it takes.
How long were you doing the business before you were actually able to take the leap and do it full time?
7 years.
Ooh. 7 years.
7 years. Yeah. But that's working more at night than I was working during the day.
We've been there.
Yeah, y'all know.
Yeah.
And everybody talking about, oh man, we worked hard today. Well, what about those other 14 hours you worked?
Yeah. It's so fascinating. And also, if you think about cameras, just trail cameras in general, of all technology that's come out for hunting, especially deer hunting, to me, that's like the one thing that's come out. First off, it's still very polarizing with for some reason, y'all YouTube audience out there. A lot of guys love them, and there's a vocal minority that hates trail cameras for some reason. But it's one of those pieces of technology that has come about that has been so impactful in the space. People knowing what's out there, being more selective harvesting. And to me, it was one of the reasons I feel like where the term kind of like trophy hunting, people wanting to kill mature animals, really came about because they could know what's on a property that they were hunting. Did you see that happen as well with cameras?
Absolutely. And that was one of the deals when people were trying to, and people have learned, if you're managing a deer herd, if you're not managing by age class, you're not managing the deer herd. You have to manage by age class. You have to have that bell curve. You have to preserve those younger bucks to be able to have them get to maturity. I think one of the deals Texas A&M did, a deer at 4.5 is generally only 65% of what he'll be at 5 and 6.5. Everybody want to kill bigger bucks. The secret's to let them get older. They couldn't do that because they didn't know how to age an animal. They'd never seen enough deer. All of a sudden, you got cameras and you got everyone on there, and you had people. There isn't almost a day, but there isn't a week goes by, I don't get a picture on camera from somebody that says, hey, how old is this deer molted? And they're wanting to know. But that whole stewardship model of them managing their herd that the camera absolutely pivotal in making that accepted and practiced. And now it's kind of, if you're not doing it, people sort of like, no, so you're not doing that. Oh, you're really not doing it. Because that's the way you manage deer.
So that all came about, and also probably around the same time as when QDMA got started.
Yes.
So you had the cameras, you had like these biologists, everybody kind of going into like the management side and publishing articles and really trying to educate more people. It all kind of came full circle there, which kind of, because I think of like my generation, the generation like my uncles, who are all in their late 50s, and they started implementing cameras, I think in the maybe early 2000s is when they really started getting a hold of some. And with QDMA really kind of already popping off, and everybody was much more focused on let's kill a better deer. I'm still the individual, like shoot whatever makes you happy, but there's something fun about if you get the opportunity to full mature buck and can kill that deer, harvest that animal, how rewarding that is, whether he's 110 inches in Alabama or he's 175 inches in any other state. It's an amazing accomplishment, but using the camera and seeing what's out there also to me fuels the fire and the passion, especially now with cell cameras, to while you're at work and you're getting images of all these animals, what you're looking forward to comes Saturday morning when you get to go out there and go hunt finally. And I feel like it's also helped push the lifestyle aspect of hunting based off trail cameras, knowing what's out there and keeping you excited, not only all year, but throughout the season when you're grinding at work and you're looking for that one opportunity for that guy that only gets to hunt on Saturday and maybe a Sunday afternoon or something.
Well, and the trail camera, we were fortunate, not only did it help you with knowing what game's on there, it helped you knowing with what idiots may be walking on your property that you catch somebody. You talking about stop people from poaching and walking. They know that camera's there. The same deal, the secret to keeping people off your properties, make it easier for them to go somewhere else. You got those cameras and you get a picture that's enforceable to have them arrested, that'll stop it. And so you had them for security. On the lakes down here, the boat houses got broken into. You know how many cameras we sold people to put in their boat houses that they would see who's taking their stuff out of their boat house. Portable DC security. Why that was never done, you know what, you would think some of the big guys would have got that. Nobody ever gotten that. That portable DC security. We sold them to logging companies that were counting loads. If the drivers were sneaking loads of logs out, they'd put them on the road. They'd know, how many loads y'all cut today? 17. That's funny, there's 19 trucks went in and out here. How about that? We sold them to construction guys. Hey, that big stack of that pallet of plywood's gone. Guess what? It was your son. They took it last night. You talking about one of the guys at Auburn. This is a great story, Don. I love the little stories. He was one of the coaches, had a fish pond. And he told me, he said, somebody's slipping in my pond. And I gave him 4 cameras. I'm not going to I'll tell you off camera who it is, but I'm going to tell you. I gave him 4 cameras, put them up. And I said, you'll get this. You got them. This will get them. He called me, said, I got the picture. He said, young man, he's got a stringer. He said he's killing it. He was growing trophy bass. Norman of Southeastern Farm was managing his pond. And they had a string. He was so mad when I saw him. They had bass this big, this big, and this big on that stringer and was just taking fish out. Oh, he was so mad. And he was trying to find out who it was. And somebody said, that's so-and-so's son that works over at the university. He took it over there, walked up to her desk, and now this guy's a football coach under Coach Dye. He flips that picture. He said, you know that young man? Woman goes, never seen him before in my life. That is the gospel. Told him that. And then finally, of course, he said, you sure? And they finally kept on, and finally he got it to be admitted. But that's exactly how. But that allows you to go back to the deal again. Guys want to manage their place. They want to have stewardship. That camera allows you to manage it from the game side and the non-game side.
Now, I want to get into your lifestyle of traveling and hunting. because to me that's the fascinating thing about you. You've hunted all over the place. You've hunted pretty much anything you can get your hands on. What originally got you started doing that and traveling hunting? Was it truly from the business side and taking customers hunting, or was it like your passion to try to hunt different species?
Really and truly, it was the passion that I wanted to do it, but I had the passion to build that business, so those merged. But that one, at one time, like Chuck Adams being able to take everything with a bow of all the Pope and Young species, I was headed down that path, and then business got so big, there was no way to do. I mean, what he did with that is just unbelievable. I mean, that's extremely difficult to get done. What he got done, and these guys now that do that and kill all the species with a bow, that's tough. But that same passion, but then there was places I liked. I never liked South Africa much, kind of a different kind of hunting. Alaska was as good as it get. I liked the self-sufficiency of the people in Alaska. You know, down here, if something breaks, you go to the store, get a new one, and put out. You better know how to fix it up here, or you're going to be sitting there in that cold. And that whole attitude, Texas is kind of that way. Out west was kind of that way, and really liked that a lot better. I liked, we hunted Tanzania, got to hunt the Selous, largest wilderness area in Africa, 17 million acres. Flew in the first night we were flying in about dark. This is how remote it is. And I thought, how are we going to land? We were in a little Cessna, and they said, you'll see. And you got there and you could see the lights on the runway, and I thought, there's no electricity in here. You got down there, they had pieces of tin that they'd cut holes in, and one side was rusted, but the other side they would turn up, and they had shined it with rocks, and that reflected so the planes could land.
Oh, wow.
Oh, it was bad to the bone. Bad to the bone. Oh, that was so cool. That was pretty neat. Mike Callahan and I spent almost a month over there together in the Selous, and that was just cool deal. And you know, just getting to hunt those places. But I like more the self-sufficiency. You do it yourself. Like I was telling you, when I got my guide's license for Alaska and these other places we were guiding, and what was cool, I loved, and I still like pulling the trigger just as much as anybody, just as much as I did 50 years ago. But what was cool, if you could guide a guy that had never hunted, or a lady or whoever, and you were able to get them that animal, you could have taken him 20 times. So you're still doing the same thing. You're still enjoying the hunt. It's just somebody else pulling the trigger. So but that whole aspect of all that just ate me up. So we combined that with entertaining the customers. And you know what? It wasn't carrying them to suck up to get them to carry your product. I wanted to show them we knew what we were talking about. We knew hunting better than anybody in the industry. And we wanted them to see that, and I wanted to build a relationship that we would not let them down to have. And I don't know if you've heard the term, the killer of mass merchants is empty pegs. Do y'all know empty pegs? Mm-mm. You go in the store and those pegs are empty. Whoever has that peg, they won't be in that mass merchant long. They have to have product on the shelf. And I wanted them to know we would not leave them with empty pegs. You give us the opportunity to manufacture product for you, we're going to have you product in that store. A lot of people mismanage their business. It cost them in the end. We weren't going to do that with our partners. We were true partners with them. But to get that across, you get a guy, and I told you this earlier, you get a guy out of their boardroom or out of their offices, and you get them out on a hunt for 10 days, nobody's going to take our customer. We had them. That was it. And that's the way we built those relationships. I was giving a speech down at Auburn to the business school, the whole business school class in there, and talking about how we built all that. And the professor said, tell them about how you built that. And I said, you know, we built it through trust and relationships is how we built this business. And one of the guys in the back held his hand up. Young guy, this has probably been, 6 years ago, 7, 8 years ago. He said, Mr. Moultrie, that was good for your generation. He said, but all that doesn't matter now. He said, relationships don't matter on that now. I said, let me tell you something. That's the biggest mistake that you hadn't learned yet. And I answered him in front of that whole group. That is the only thing that matters. If they can't trust you, I don't care who it is, your end user customer, the dealer customer, if they can't trust you, you don't have a relationship, you don't have any business with them. So that was huge, and that goes back to that same deal: sell the brand, build the relationship. I think Mossy Oak has done an incredible job with building the relationship. How many kids got Mossy Oak t-shirts and hats on? You can't turn on the TV and not see them. Toxie and them did a phenomenal job with that. And the rest of the hunting industry that did it, that's the way you built it.
With you liking the self-sufficient style of hunting,
Yeah.
these remote places, I've got a bunch of questions on that, but it seems like you're very interested in the adventure side of hunting, and that is something I think deep down everybody can relate with, even though they might not have experienced that style of hunting. You've got to have some stories where stuff went wrong.
Oh, yeah.
So,
Monsters up.
maybe walk us through one or two of them of like, when you're that remote in some of these areas, what can go wrong, what has gone wrong, and how do you go about getting out of those situations?
I had a guy, I was guiding a caribou hunt in Alaska. And with caribou, if you don't get in front of them, you're never catching up to them. They're steady walking and eating, walking and eating, walking and eating, walking and eating. And we're trying to get around in front of these caribou, guy from Atlanta, Georgia. And I look back and he's just pouring sweat and is shaking and whatnot. And he had this, it looked like, I don't know if you've ever seen when you repair a radiator, those little sticks that you patch a radiator with. And he's trying to get them out of there. And he said, get this, make sure I can get this. I said, what is wrong with you? He said, man, I'm severe diabetic. And he hadn't taken his stuff. And he's about toasted. I mean, we get him back. I said, why didn't you fill out we send a note and letter ahead of time to, if you're allergic to anything, if you have any special needs, any of that. But, I didn't want anybody to know that kind of deal. But that was, bad. On the bear charges, where it's always, you have the bear charges, and this sounds bad. I don't want to sound bad, but I'm going to tell you, I thought it was the coolest deal I'd ever been around. That bear charges, and I don't know if you've ever had anybody tell you, and this is the straight from being there and some of the guys in the industry that's been with us, when you have them charged, when a bear is coming to you, that bear is putting his front feet between his rear feet and they're running. And when they're running, all you hear is that brush breaking, and you'll hear that bear going, oh, 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 oh. And a lot of the videos that you see them on the rivers and stuff, you tune that other out. That's what you can hear, that bear doing that. And that sticks in your head, hearing that. But you get a guy on a charge, we would come back and there'd be people, and I wouldn't always tell Patty and Peter. She'd always want to know we'd be at dinner or something. And somebody'd say, wasn't that unbelievable about that charge? And I'd see her look over, and I thought, I wish you hadn't said that. Because you were so remote. When we'd go in the bush up there for 3 to 4 weeks, that was pre-satellite phone. The first time I remember carrying a satellite phone in the bush was at 9/11. And I was able to call and find out what was going on. There was something, we were shipping Walmart orders in or something. I said, what in the hell you mean the orders hadn't gone out? He said, man, everything in the world shut down. And I said, y'all got to get those orders. And I had no idea what he was talking about. I was thinking, get the orders out. I didn't know the whole deal had been turned upside down in the whole U.S. and the world over this deal. But you were so remote, you really didn't know. So, any news, usually when guys would come back in, I would usually come into town, go take a shower, get a motel, come back in, wash everything, meet my new guys, carry them back out in the bush for 7 to 10 days. Alaska hunts are usually 7 to 10 days. On that, go back again, do that again. And then those people that would leave, I'd say, hey, call Patty and tell her if we killed so-and-so or it was great, and they would. But you didn't hear anything. There was a Cessna in Iliamna that went up and something broke and it went straight up. And we happened to be flying out of Iliamna then and came back down and killed everybody in the plane. And of course, Patty gets that news article, 7 people killed on the plane or however many it was, 9 in that caravan. on that. We had Ray Mursky, the guy I was talking about. I was guiding Ray and I were up there, and the guy came in, and this was right at the first of GPS, handheld GPS. And I don't know if you know about the planes up there, but beavers and otters, they're low and slow. They fly low and slow, but they're heavy, but they're unbelievable in the bushes. And they're made by de Havilland. A lot of them I remember seeing 1957, and they've all been rebuilt, and the flight services would fly in and out. And the plane came in, and it had, I think there was 7 people, I think, in the plane, or whatever the maximum was. There was only one seat. And I said, Ray, you got to get back. You go on. He said, no, Buck, I'm not going. You go. Neither of us went. They went out. The guy had that deal, and they thought he was looking in his lap at that handheld GPS, and he was going out the pass, and you circled. And the problem with that plane, if you tipped it too much, and I'm not a pilot, but what they were explaining to me, and he fell out of the air, hit the pass, and killed everybody in there that night. And you talking about tight. That next morning when they came to get Ray and I out, you talking about tight. First accident they'd had in like 30 years like that. But that kind of stuff went on. I mean, it would get your attention. There wasn't. I remember telling guys when we'd be hunting, they'd get at a creek and jump over it. You would go into camp for 10 days. There wasn't a plane coming back to get you for 10 days. And I'd say, you slip on that rock and break your leg, it's going to be a long 10 days. But and you couldn't have all that foolishness that was going on. You had to be serious about it, because there was no, where we hunted was so remote, you might hear one float plane a day go over. Other than that, zip. Oh, when we got the satellite phone, I thought it was the greatest deal. And those first ones, WorldCom or whoever it was, had the big long antennas, and you had to turn with it to get it to keep the signal. And then finally they got the good ones, but that was from the earliest days. But yeah, but again, that same self-sufficiency deal, that was the cool part of it.
Were you more nervous about negative wildlife encounters or equipment breakdowns?
Really, if you'd research, neither of those really. I was more worried about personal breakdowns or malfunction. You know, we all had claw type extractors. We all shot pre-64s or Model 70s. And, you know, always we shot 338s up there. Just seemed to be a great caliber for anything you would hunt in Alaska. And it was just, all that was good. But it would go in, you know, a lot of times you'd go into if you'd killed a moose, and you'd go into the moose kill and you'd see fresh, hot brown bear tracks on that going in, and you would say, and the guy that I had was our master guide up there taught me this. He said that bear's on that kill. I said, how'd you know? And this was the very first time learning this. He said, see all the magpies in the tree? The bears would have them off of it. If the birds were down on the kill, there wasn't a bear on it. And just little stuff like that you would learn. And oh man, I was like a sponge soaking. I thought that was the coolest information there'd ever been. But you would learn that kind of stuff, and that these old time Alaskan guys knew.
What kind of woodsmanship skills like that did you learn while hunting up there? I mean, you said you haven't done it in a little while, but
Yeah.
hunting with these other guides and learning from them, what other woodsmanship skills did you learn from those?
Yeah, well, thank goodness my dad had taught me early on. I knew how to build a fire. I knew how to get, you know, some of that up there of if everything's soaking wet, how do you get the fire started? It's a pretty good way. If you're going to be in Alaska, you're going to be soaking wet, especially the southeast chain. We were hunting ABC chain and going out of Juneau. It rains every day. You better know about that. You better have the right gear. You better have, instead of some of that early Gore-Tex stuff that didn't work, you better have rubber line stuff. You want to stay dry, you know, the stuff like that. But we really and truly, and when I'd go to the SHOT Show in those early years, I was there to sell. But you know what number 2 task was? I loved going and trying to find anything that I could use on that next set of hunts next year that was better than what we had. Clothing-wise, bipod-wise, pack-wise, meat pack, anything that would aid boots. Oh my gosh, the change in boots and all that. And so it was cool to be able to evolve the latest stuff, I remember there was a deal when you'd come up on those streams and like you were making an approach on a bear or a moose or something, there'd always be wet bottoms to try to get across. And if you were hunting waders that got to be cumbersome, there was a guy that had over the boot waders. You remember
The
seeing-
Wigglies or what?
They rolled up and they were fused together of like a heavy canvas waterproof deal. And you'd unroll and put them over, go across the stream, take them back off. You back rolling again over the grassland, stuff like that. So that was cool to go see that and, and tried to get the very best equipment. We were a Leica dealer at one time. I thought the Leica binoculars, I love to use Leica. And there's lots of good stuff, but just had liked the Leica stuff. That was the binoculars were just fantastic. But again, that last 10 minutes, when you're going to kill them or not, to be successful, you had to have that. Or it helped to have that. You didn't have to have it, but it helped to have that.
Do you have a good story from Alaska of close calls, whether it had to do with the animal or, hunter, wise? Someone couldn't handle the moment, couldn't handle the situation?
Now, I'm not going to tell you who it is.
No, don't say a
I'm
name.
going to tell you where it is.
Yeah.
But yeah, we had some of those, but I had a guy that was waiting on the float plane and wanting to, he had killed a caribou and I've forgotten what else, and this is nothing on him. This is just human nature. Guys hadn't been around this. And we're down waiting on the plane to come in. But the problem is with weather, you book 10 days, you may not get home for 17. You may be there a week because those low pressure systems come in and you're there. You try to fly, you die. You don't fly in all those mountains. And so you have to have the days. So you wait and you never know what the weather's going to roll in so you can get out of the camp or not. And we were waiting on the plane. I look down there and I see the finest silver-tip grizzly you've ever, and these are inland grizzlies. These are the brown bears are big, but they get big. Do y'all know the difference in a brown bear and a grizzly? You know how they're classified? This is a cool thing. Now, if they're within 75 miles of the coast, because the brown bear eats salmon, they're classified brown bear. If they're not, they're grizzlies. Grizzlies are the badass blue-collar guy. They work for that living. They're the ones that you don't want to mess with. The brown bears are bad too when they want to be, but they're interested in eating and gorging and eating those salmon. But there's this beautiful grizzly, and I said, come on, let's go get that bear. And he said, he'd never been around bears. I don't know. I said, no. I said, and we had tags already that we'd bought before we went into camp. And finally he said, okay. So we go down there and that bear is slick open. He's eating blueberries. And when they're eating blueberries, they're down there and that head is swinging. And they're picking those berries off that tree when that head's swinging. And we got up and I would like to get them into about 75 yards and just have the wind in your favor. And there was one little grown up area about the size of two of the houses here. And it's naked. I'm talking about above tree line. And I said, look, when you shoot him now, put it, don't get on the shoulder, but get in the vitals. And he shoots and that bear rolls over like doing a somersault and goes in that thicket. And there's a hill about as high as this roof above that thicket. And I thought, oh, that's good. He said, what do you think? I said, I think you hit him pretty good. I said, you poked him good. I said, let's wait. And we waited about an hour. And he was really nervous about it. And I asked him, I said, how do you feel about the shot? He said, no, I think it was good. He had 4 bullets in his gun, 3 now. This is, and I'm telling you the gospel, how this happened. And so I said, look, I'm going to go make sure he's dead. And he goes, no, you're not going to leave. I said, look, all I'm going to do is walk upwind and let my scent go through there. And if he doesn't blow out, he's probably dead. So I eased up there, nothing, came back. And he said, what do you think? And of course, this is 10-foot alders in this little patch. And I said, let me see. And I picked up a rock, about a little bigger than a softball. And I pitched it, and I said, let's try one more time on this. And I pitched it in there, and we're up about 15 feet above this patch. That was how I could throw that rock in there. And when I did, dead in the middle of this little patch about the size, all of a sudden, not running, no breathing sound, any of that, but those alders were going click, 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 and that's that bear coming dead to us. And he was walking to us, click, click. and he was sitting down, and I had my knee on his back. I remember when I was guiding him, I had my knee on his back, and I could feel him just, coming undone about it. And I said, look, wait till he gets to the edge, and we're going to I said, you be ready, and we're going to get another bullet in him. And I'm watching, I've got the binoculars up, and I can see him coming to the edge, and he stops. This bear was full alert, and I'll tell you why in a minute when we find out. But I see, and there's an alder like this, and the limbs and the Y on it's probably 2.5 foot, and pretty big alder. And I said, you see that Y in that alder? And he said, yeah. I said, put it right above there. I said, you can see the hair above there. And of course, he didn't see the hair. But he shoots, and of course, he's jacked. And I joked around telling the story sometimes he might have hit Anchorage down in Alaska when he shot. And when he shot, that bear charged. And this is a for real charge. And that bear hits that alder, and that Y is on his body like this. And that bear was pushing on those alders and snapping and just raising cane. And I said, now remember, 2 bullets. I said, he's coming. Shoot him again, bolt the gun. He bolts, no hit. The bear turns and breaks and goes down the edge and comes out, and there's like a little opening road. And here he's coming. That same front and back. And I'm not paying attention to him. I'm paying attention to that. And I just take his rifle and I peel up and I let him get about 30 yards and shoot him dead between the eyes and roll him. And I bolted it, and I'm talking to him. I'm not paying. He's from here to that cabinet. And I said, oh, man, you killed a great grizzly. It's great. He's beautiful. And I can hear him back there. And I turn around, and he's gone from the planet. He's in the fetal position. I asked my dad when I got back, I said, do you ever see anybody like that? And he said, World War II. And he said, they called it shell-shocked. And I said, what'd y'all do for it? He said, best thing over there was to slap the you-know-what out of him. But he said that sounds exactly like the guys being shell-shocked in World War II. But he was gone. Got him back. But he was, bless his heart, he was scared to death. It fried him. Got him back up. Tried to get, he didn't want anything to do with the bear. I said, look, the plane's not coming. We went down there, skinned him, packed him back. And that night they had a, the rolls that electrical wire come on, that those wooden rolls, and the camps all had one in it, and you used them as tables out by the fire pit. And we're in the middle of nowhere. We're hundreds of miles in the bush. And the secret to those bear hides is you got to cool them down. You got to get them cold or the hair will pull. So I always prop the mouth open. You take everything out by the skull. The next day you'd get the skull out if it's late in the day. But I'd prop the mouth open trying to get air and cool in there. And I drape that hide over that spool. That spool probably 6 feet big around. And there was one thing of wine left in that camp. He got into that night, and we were laying there, and I heard him about 1 o'clock get up and go out there and relieve himself, and he comes back in, and I hear him, and we're laying there, and he goes, Moultrie. And I said, yeah. I said, why? He goes, I can't take that bear. I said, man, you kill that bear. I said, that's a great bear for you. And he goes, man, I walked out there in that moon shining, and all I see is that skull and that deal open, and that bear coming. He said, I can't take that bear. I said, no. I said, we'll get back. So the float plane came in and got us the next day. I flew out with him. We went back to camp. He's telling everybody that story about everything. And, of course, the master guide goes, how was it? And I said, it was tight. But, you did what you're supposed to do. And he flew out. We came back, and I said, look, I'll never tell that story. That's your choice. That's your bear. We come back, and we go to dinner. His wife was good friends with Patty and I, and we go to dinner. And he starts telling the story. And I'm saying, of course, I hadn't told Patty about it. She's sitting there with both them eyes. Like, wait a minute, I hadn't heard this. And he tells it just exactly the way it is, all that. And his wife just can't believe it, that his wife's kind of an outdoorsy kind of woman. And she's like, I can't believe that got a hold of you. Like, he said, yeah. And of course, Patty was chopped. Afterwards, we got out of there. I thought you were going to tell me about the charges. I said, well, I was. It just didn't happen yet. But that was close. That was tough. I mean, that was a tough deal. But that same deal, you ask about what did it. The equipment was right. The whole preparation was right. To get your guy's license, you have to know what to do in those circumstances. You know how to drop that bear and get him killed. All that was right. You knew you had to have multimedia and advanced first aid to get your guy's license. You knew what to do with your guys in camp, take care of them. All that was right. But did it just happen? Yeah. We had 3 of those in my time there that I'm talking about guys that I knew would come uncorked, and you just can't, I mean, men's men. But it was tough. And in 30 years, I had 3 of them.
Why was the bear still fully alert? Did he shoulder punch him?
Gut shot. He wasn't alert. He was mad. Gut shot him. Only time I've ever seen a gut shot animal roll over forward like that. I thought he'd hit him in the front and the shoulders. By him, he just like you were rolling a flip, like a gymnast deal. Gut shot.
I wrote this question down earlier because while we were talking about stuff, it's the only question I wrote down. Of all the species that you've hunted, if you could only hunt one for the rest of your life, what would it be?
I like the bears. And that's because there's no rhyme or reason to them. And I enjoy it all. Man, you go out in the fall, and like last fall and this fall, I'm looking forward to it already. The elk camps we go in, and to hear those elk bugling, probably as majestic a sound as there is in the wood, and be able to call that elk into about 15 feet. Oh, it's unbelievable. It's turkeys that can smell. If you enjoy turkey hunting, you're going to enjoy elk hunting. I mean, it's the same deal. So you know what? I like all of it. Every bit of it I like. Not like I love every bit of it. But the bears were cool. I mean, they were special and neat animals, from whether it was black bears to whatever it was, to big brown bears to inland grizzlies. That was just cool stuff. The guy we're going to go with tonight, fishing, that's going with us, came up and hunted with me I got him for 10 days, and he had a bunch of guys from his company, and we got them all bears. And most of the guys, when you were that remote, that they would freak, because they would think, oh, I got to get out of here. I got business to do. I want to go back. And they're ready to get out. And John, that y'all will see tonight, ask him this story on the boat. Say, how'd you feel about it up there? He would always ask me, he goes, look, everybody's ready to go. Can I stay the rest of the time you're up here? He loved it. And he had that pure, but he was very self-sufficient. Same deal. A guy that is self-sufficient of himself, he can handle that. If he's not, he can't. And that was what was cool. Ask John about that tonight, though. See what he tells you. Yeah.
Perfect.
Man, that's crazy. We could sit here and tell hunt stories all night for sure. Might have to have you back on just for a hunt story episode.
Absolutely.
No, we have to do that at the cabin.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
We'll do that.
And it's just all hunting stories.
Yeah.
Keep going,
Yeah.
sorry.
So one of the things I wanted to ask you about, to kind of tie a bow around this podcast, we've talked a lot about your business, the hunting industry. I'm just curious on your thoughts today of where hunting is, where not even just the industry, but just as a whole. Do you like where it's at right now? Do you like where it's going? What are some things that you see in the future?
Yes, I like it, because there's a lot of people into it. We ran into, when we went in office with Governor Riley for Game and Fish in the state of Alabama, Barnett Lawley was commissioner and I was chairman. Hunting was about 7% nationwide. It dropped in the 3s, and that was very concerning, that it was going down. But you got to look what was going on at that time. The divorce rate was out the roof. You had kids that had only mothers. They didn't know how to hunt until you carry somebody hunting. But then the niche came up of the fastest growing segment was women involved in the hunting. Now those numbers are coming back up. People are involved, the stewardship. They see they can take a piece of property and improve it, and all of a sudden not only their house has appreciation, but a piece of property they improve over 20 years and they get 5 times for it, what they paid for it. Look at that all the property companies that's selling hunting real estate, it's hot commodity. Lots of people want it. You tell me somebody that in their kids, I can't tell you how many people tell me, man, I got to have that lake. I'm going to carry my kids fishing on the weekend. They want their kids to be out. That's sitting in front of a TV or holding a Game Boy or whatever they call them now. That's not what's turning out those great guys and ladies. Man, it's having that outdoor experience. So yeah, I like that part of it. And it's driven. Now, are there some states where there's a problem with that? Yeah. But you know what? Look at the whole political system in the U.S. That all changes and change. That'll change. It's going to change. But it's well protected, well guarded. It's well in good hands. And again, I told you all earlier, don't mistake, that's from the game and fish agencies. And just like the guys that had mentored me on hunting in Alaska, those two guys, the older guys, one was in Juneau and one was in Anchorage, the toughest, best hunters I've ever been around in my life. They passed that on. That's good stuff. All that. Those guys were fantastic. Nobody could touch them. You go up there. The worst case was you get an Eastern guy that killed a few whitetails, and he thinks he's Daniel Boone. You go up there and he finds out quick he hadn't even seen what real Western and Alaska hunting is. These guys would teach them and bring them along. They're great guys. That has driven this hunting industry. The yearn for people loving it. So your answer, yeah, I like where it's going. That's good. Well, who would have thought that we'd have had that collection of animals in most college campuses? Probably you'd run into a lot more liberal non-hunting attitudes, and we'd have got a collection of every game animal in North America in there on display. It's pretty good stuff.
I agree. That is good stuff. And then one other question. I'm curious on your thoughts on this because you've been involved with the state agencies. You know a lot of the people involved in, let's just say, Alabama's government.
Yeah.
When it comes to preservation of the resource or rebuilding parts of the resource like quail, we're talking about quail earlier, and they're pretty much gone,
Yes.
What do you see as the solution to that? Because a lot of times, and a lot of people in our space, and we've done this in the past, like we try to advocate like, oh, wildlife and freshwater, they ought to do this or that on the WMA or the National Forest, and they ought to burn more there, or whatever the case may be. But the reality is in Alabama, I think it's 3% of our land mass is public. So if you're going to get something like quail to come back and you're going to do large scale habitat improvement, public land is a very small piece of the puzzle. It's private land. In your opinion, what are some things that maybe we could do as a state to incentivize private landowners to take better care of their property, to manage for, timber, but also wildlife? I'm just curious on your opinion on that.
No, there's some federal matching that goes in that's available through the agencies that you can get matching dollars to help you do that. The state is always up. The state holds trapping schools to teach you how to trap. You got predators and because nobody's trapping for fur anymore, and you got raccoons rampant because people are feeding. They don't know how to kill them. You don't kill them, they're going to kill every turkey nest on your place. People killing hundreds and hundreds of raccoons because they're out of control. That teaches them to be better stewards of that property and do what you say. And it boils back down again to dollars in the state. And we're a non-fund agency. We're a non-general fund agency. So we have to get all our money through Pittman Robinson money. On the hunting side, we sell more licenses, we get more income. You look at what we talked about, the different type licenses that deliver funding to the state. That allows our state agency of game and fish to do more for the state. Look at Forever Wild. 20 years ago, you thought we'd had that much property. Look at what's done with Forever Wild. All that's done. So, and this sounds bad, and people are going to say, oh, money is the driving force of that. That money has to be delivered to the project of what we want to do in regenerating projects for Forever Wild or in the state, those state agencies. You want Alabama to have more money? Buy another hunting license. That's the way you do it. That's what generates the funds to have that be done. Without that, you're not going to have success at it. And that's why these other states have had a great success at it. That and through private donation.
Yeah. Yeah. And you brought up the turkeys too. That, like, I should have brought that up in the initial question. Like, that's one of the big game animals right now that people are concerned about. There's a lot of talk about turkeys declining. And we were talking about Chuck Sykes earlier.
Yeah.
We had a conversation with Chuck one time about timber companies in Alabama. You know, they own a lot of the land that people hunt in Alabama, whether it's hunting clubs or even a lot of our WMAs or timber company land that the state leases. And what Chuck was saying, he's like, look, these timber companies, they have a fiduciary responsibility to make money, and they make money through timber. They don't make money through turkeys and deer. I mean, they might make a little bit on the leases to, I guess, pay their property tax or something like that. So I don't know. I just like asking people that question because it's like, how do you get a timber company interested in wild turkeys
Yeah.
or whitetails or quail?
Through hunting leases is going to get them about as much money if it'll pay their taxes on the property. That's what most of these people are looking for the tax. Then the property can sit there and generate what it's going to generate. You can generally get the taxes paid through the hunting lease. So that's a good reason to make the hunting better on the lease. The power company has been a great partner. They were doing a lot with quail that up under the transmission lines, planting quail plots and offering to be involved in that. You get big industry, again, money involved, you get it done. That's what does that. Probably the most successful quail project in the Southeast is Tall Timbers on regenerating wild birds. They have fantastic success. Now, it comes at a price, but you can get it. So that, again, you take what you said earlier, take care of the resource. To take care of the resource, you got to take care of the habitat. If you don't have the habitat, you're not going to have the resource. You got the habitat, you're going to have it. What was the show on TV? Build it and they'll come, plant it and they'll come. In game. And that's what's going to drive it.
Yeah.
But people have taken that. That's a natural. People want to be stewards of their place. They're more passionate about, I think they're more passionate about the wildlife stuff than any issue in the state. You know, I always say religion and politics. I'm going to tell you, they're passionate about their hunting and fishing. I guarantee you they are. You go in and mess up a guy's hunt because you're wandering around poaching, you find out if he's passionate about it.
Oh, yeah. We were talking about the cab meeting earlier. I saw some passionate people at the cab meeting.
Yeah.
No doubt about that.
Well, perfect. Well, Dan, we appreciate your time today. I know we've been here for quite a while interviewing it, and even beforehand, just having a conversation. But I love hearing your stories, both from the business side, but also from your hunting adventures over the years.
Yeah.
For all the listeners out there and the viewers, if y'all have enjoyed this podcast, make sure you subscribe. You're tuning in because, Dan, hopefully we can have you back on again in the near future.
Absolutely.
Tell more just hunting stories.
We'll go down to the lodge. We'll build a fire in the fireplace. We'll eat a big dinner, and then we'll sit up and talk hunting stories. How about that?
Oh, man.
perfect.
That sounds fun.
I look forward to that.
Absolutely. Well, everybody out there, thank y'all for watching. Thank you for listening to the podcast, and we'll catch you back here on the next episode from the Southern Outdoorsman. And remember, guys, y'all stay Southern.